Welcome to the shadowy depths of the forest, where darkness reigns and secrets lurk behind every twisted tree. I'm your guide into the unknown, ready to lead you through tales that will chill you to the bone. But before we venture deeper, tell me, what city are you watching from? Leave a comment below and let me know where the fear is spreading tonight. If you dare to join our community of brave souls, hit that subscribe button now. And don't forget to leave a like if you want more terrifying tales from the deep woods. Now let me take you to a place where the branches reach out like gnarled fingers, and the wind whispers warnings through decaying leaves. Our story begins on a moonless night, when a group of friends decided to test their courage by camping in the heart of these cursed woods. Little did they know, something ancient and hungry was waiting for them. I never should have come to these cursed woods alone. As night fell, an unnatural silence descended, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the chill wind. The campfire's flickering light did little to dispel the creeping unease that had settled over me like a shroud. That's when I first saw them. Two pinpricks of sickly green light floating in the inky blackness beyond my campfire. My breath caught in my throat as I fumbled for my flashlight, pulse quickening with each passing second. "Hello?" I called out, my voice embarrassingly small in the vast darkness. "Is someone there?" No response came, save for the mocking whisper of wind through the trees. I stood, legs trembling beneath me, and swept the beam of my flashlight across the tree line. What I saw made my blood turn to ice. Where there had been two glowing orbs, now dozens of eyes blinked back at me. They were everywhere, multiplying with each sweep of my light. Mesmerizing pinpoints of eerie luminescence dotted the forest, far too many to count. "This can't be real," I whispered, rubbing my eyes furiously. But when I looked again, the nightmarish vision remained. What ungodly creatures lurked just beyond the veil of darkness? I couldn't tear my gaze away, transfixed by their otherworldly glow. The rational part of my mind screamed at me to run, to flee this place and never look back. But my body refused to obey, rooted to the spot by a mixture of terror and morbid fascination. As I stood there paralyzed, a voice drifted from the shadows. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard before, ancient and rasping, like dead leaves scraping across stone. "Sarah," it called, my name elongated into a sibilant hiss. "We've been waiting for you." A chill ran down my spine. How did it know my name? I hadn't told anyone where I was going on this solo camping trip. I'd wanted to get away from it all, to clear my head after the messy breakup. Now I was beginning to realize just how foolish that decision had been. What are you?" I managed to croak out, my throat constricting with fear. A low, rumbling chuckle emanated from the darkness, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We are the old ones, the spirits of this forest. We have watched and waited for centuries, biding our time." As the voice spoke, I noticed movement in the shadows. The eyes were drawing closer, hemming me in. Panic clawed at my chest as I realized I was surrounded, cut off from any hope of escape. "What do you want from me?" I asked, hating how my voice quavered. There was a pause, pregnant with malevolent anticipation. Then, "You, Sarah. We want you." The implications of those words sent a fresh wave of terror coursing through me. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet in my haste to put distance between myself and those haunting eyes. "Stay back!" I shouted, brandishing my flashlight like a weapon. "I'm warning you!" My pitiful threat was met with mocking laughter, the sound echoing through the trees like the cackle of demented hyenas. The eyes continued their inexorable approach, and I could now make out vague, shadowy forms attached to them. Twisted masses of branches and leaves that seemed to move with unnatural fluidity. "You cannot resist us, Sarah," the voice intoned. "You are to be our ambassador, our link to the world of men." Tears of frustration and fear streamed down my cheeks as I cast about desperately for some means of escape. But everywhere I turned, those baleful eyes stared back at me. their green glow seeming to burn into my very soul. "Please," I begged, my resolve crumbling. "I don't understand. Why me?" A cold, spectral tendril caressed my cheek, causing me to recoil in horror. "Because you are special, Sarah. You can hear us, see us, you have the gift." I shook my head vehemently, unwilling to accept this madness. "No, you're not real. This is just a nightmare. I'll wake up any second now." But even as I spoke the words, I knew them to be a lie. The chill night air on my skin, the acrid smell of wood smoke, the all-too-real terror coursing through my veins, it was all horrifyingly real. The voice took on a harder edge, all pretense of benevolence falling away. "You have no choice in this matter, Sarah. You will serve us or you will join us. Those are your only options." As if to emphasize this point, the shadowy forms pressed closer. I could now make out gnarled wooden limbs and faces twisted into grotesque mockeries of human features. The eyes, those terrible glowing eyes, were inches from my own. In that moment, I realized the true depths of the trap I'd wandered into. The spirits of the forest had awakened, and I was to be their unwilling ambassador, or their next victim. Either way, I knew with chilling certainty that my life as I knew it was over. As the shadows enveloped me, their cold embrace stealing the warmth from my body, I let out a final, desperate scream. But there was no one to hear it, no one to come to my rescue. In these cursed woods, I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was a sea of glowing eyes, watching impassively as I was consumed by the forest's ancient hunger. And in that final moment, I understood that I had become just another pair of eyes in the night, destined to lure unsuspecting souls to their doom for all eternity. The eyes followed my every move as I huddled by the dying embers of my fire, their eerie glow piercing the darkness like ghostly lanterns. My hands shook as I tried to stoke the flames, desperate for any semblance of warmth and light. But no matter how I struggled, the fire seemed to shrink further, as if the very air around me was hostile to its existence. That's when I first heard them, disembodied voices drifting on the wind, speaking in a language older than time itself. At first, it was just a faint murmur, barely distinguishable from the rustling of leaves. But as the night wore on, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Can you hear us, Sarah?" The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, its tone a mixture of curiosity and malice. I pressed my hands to my ears, squeezing my eyes shut. "You're not real," I muttered. "This isn't happening." A chorus of laughter echoed through the trees, mocking my denial. "Oh, but we are very real, child, and you are ours now." I strained to understand, catching glimpses of ancient grudges and festering resentments against my kind. Centuries of pain and anger flooded my mind, overwhelming my senses. Humanity had wronged these beings, desecrating their sacred spaces, destroying their homes, and now I would be the vessel of their vengeance. "Please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "I haven't done anything to you. Let me go." The whispers grew louder, more frenzied. "You are all culpable," they hissed. "Your kind has forgotten the old ways, forgotten to respect the spirits of the land. Now you will remind them." With each passing moment, I felt my will eroding, replaced by an alien presence seeping into my mind. It was like ice spreading through my veins, numbing me to everything but the insistent voices. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The response came not in words but in visions. I saw myself walking out of these woods but changed. My eyes glowed with an inner fire, and the forest itself seemed to bend to my will. I watched as I approached unsuspecting hikers, luring them deeper into the woods with honeyed words and false promises. Their screams echoed in my ears as the forest claimed them, feeding the ancient spirits with their fear and pain. "No," I cried out, recoiling from the horrific images. "I won't do it, you can't make me." But even as I protested, I could feel my resolve weakening. The alien presence in my mind grew stronger, whispering seductive promises of power and immortality. "Embrace us, Sarah," the voices crooned. "Become one with the forest, and you will never know fear or pain again." I found myself nodding, my body moving of its own accord. "Yes," I heard myself say, though the words felt foreign on my tongue. "I understand now." The spirit's excitement was palpable, a tangible force that made the air around me vibrate with energy. "Good," they purred. "Now, let us show you the true nature of your new existence." Suddenly, my senses exploded. I could hear every rustle of leaves, feel the pulse of sap flowing through the trees, smell the rich earth beneath my feet. The forest was alive in a way I had never imagined, teeming with ancient magic and forgotten lore. But with this newfound awareness came a price. I could feel the spirits' hunger, their insatiable need for vengeance against those who had wronged them. And I knew with a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach that I would be the instrument of that vengeance. "What have I become?" I whispered, horrified by the transformation taking place within me. The voices laughed, a sound like breaking branches and howling wind. "You are becoming what you were always meant to be, Sarah. Our avatar, our voice in the world of men." As the night wore on, I felt myself changing, both inside and out. My skin took on a greenish tinge, my hair growing wild and tangled like vines. My nails lengthened into claws, perfect for rending flesh and bark alike. But the physical changes were nothing compared to the shift in my mind. Memories of my old life, my family, my friends, my hopes and dreams began to fade, replaced by the collective consciousness of the forest spirits. Their ancient wisdom filled my head, along with their bitter hatred for humanity. "Will there be anything left of me by dawn?" I asked, my voice barely recognizable even to my own ears. The spirit's response was cold and merciless. "Sarah will cease to be, but you will endure. A new guardian of the forest born from the ashes of your former self." As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, I felt the final vestiges of my humanity slipping away. The glowing eyes that had once terrified me now felt like old friends, their eerie light a comfort in the perpetual twilight of my new existence. I stood, stretching limbs that no longer felt quite human. The forest around me pulsed with life and magic, acknowledging its new protector. As I took my first steps into this new existence, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a nearby pond. Glowing eyes stared back at me, filled with an ancient and terrible knowledge. Would I become just another pair of eyes watching from the shadows, luring unsuspecting hikers to their doom? The thought should have horrified me, but I felt only a grim satisfaction. The forest had claimed me, body and soul, and I would serve it for eternity. As I melted back into the shadows, becoming one with the trees and undergrowth, a final whisper escaped my lips, a warning to all who might venture into these haunted woods. "Beware the whispers in the dark, for they speak of your doom." As the night wore on, the pressure in my skull became unbearable. Ghostly tendrils of mist coiled around my limbs, binding me to this forsaken place. I could feel the weight of countless eyes upon me, their sickly green glow burning through the darkness. My head throbbed with an alien presence, pushing against the boundaries of my consciousness. "Please," I whimpered, my voice hoarse from hours of screaming. "What do you want from me?" As if in response to my plea, the writhing mass of eyes before me began to shift and coalesce. I watched in horror as a figure emerged from the swirling mist, a towering shape of twisted branches and rotting leaves. It loomed over me, exuding an aura of ancient malevolence that made my very soul quiver. The entity spoke, its voice like the creaking of old trees in a storm. "Sarah," it rasped, "we have waited eons for one such as you." I trembled, unable to look away from its terrifying visage. What do you mean?" The creature's laughter sent shivers down my spine. "You are to be our emissary, our link to the world of men. Through you, we shall reclaim what was stolen from us." As it spoke, images flooded my mind. Centuries of encroachment, forests felled, sacred groves desecrated. I felt the pain and rage of countless spirits, their fury building over millennia. But why me? I asked, struggling against the misty bonds that held me. I'm nobody special. The entity leaned closer, its face a grotesque mask of bark and leaves. You have the gift, Sarah, the ability to see us, to hear our calls. You are the bridge we have sought for so long. I shook my head frantically, trying to deny the truth of its words, but deep down, I knew it was right. I had always felt a connection to nature, a whisper just beyond my understanding. Now that whisper had become a deafening roar. What if I refuse? I asked, already dreading the answer. The forest around us seemed to darken, the very air growing thick with menace. Then you will join the others, the entity hissed, gesturing to the sea of eyes surrounding us. Your consciousness absorbed, your body fuel for the trees, an eternity of torment awaits those who defy us. Panic clawed at my chest as I realized the gravity of my situation. There was no escape, no hope of rescue. I was alone in this nightmare, with only one choice before me. What would you have me do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The entity's demeanor changed, a note of satisfaction creeping into its voice. You will be our guardian, our voice in the world of men. You will protect our domain, warn away those who would desecrate our lands, and when necessary, you will bring us those whose life force we require to grow stronger. The implications of those words sent a chill through my body. You want me to lure people to their deaths? I gasped, horrified. Not death, the creature corrected. Transformation. They will become one with the forest as you nearly did. Their essence will feed our power, allowing us to expand our influence. I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face. The choice before me was impossible: become a monster or suffer for eternity. But as the pressure in my head intensified, I knew I couldn't endure much longer. If I agree, I said slowly, will you spare my family? My friends? The entity considered for a moment, its eyes glowing with an inner fire. Those you name will be marked, untouchable by our influence, but all others are fair game. Do you accept these terms? I took a shuddering breath, knowing that with my next words I would be damning countless innocent lives. But faced with the alternative, I saw no other choice. I accept, I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The forest erupted in a cacophony of whispers and rustling leaves. The misty tendrils binding me dissolved, only to be replaced by vines and roots that seemed to grow from my very skin. I could feel the entity's essence seeping into me, changing me on a fundamental level. The bargain is struck, the creature intoned, its voice resonating through the trees. Rise, Sarah, guardian of the forest. As I stood on shaky legs, I felt power coursing through my veins. The forest around me came alive in ways I had never imagined, every leaf and twig singing with ancient magic. But along with this power came knowledge, terrible, burdening knowledge of the task that lay before me. What have I done? I whispered, looking down at hands that now seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly green light. The entity's cruel laugh echoed through the trees, sending wildlife scurrying for cover. You have ensured your survival, little one, and in doing so, you have become an instrument of our will. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the canopy, I realized the true depth of my mistake. The person I had been, Sarah, the carefree hiker, was gone. In her place stood something new, something both more and less than human. Remember our bargain, the entity warned as it began to fade back into the forest. Protect our realm, bring us what we need or face the consequences. I nodded numbly, already feeling the pull of my new duties. As I took my first steps as the forest's guardian, leaves and flowers sprouted in my wake. Birds sang greetings from the trees and small animals watched me pass with knowing eyes. But beneath this facade of natural beauty, I could feel the forest's hunger, a gnawing, insatiable need that I knew would drive me to commit unspeakable acts. The thought of what I would become, the lives I would destroy, brought fresh tears to my eyes. Yet even as I wept, I felt a small, traitorous part of myself reveling in my newfound power. The forest's magic sang in my blood, promising secrets and abilities beyond my wildest dreams. As I reached the edge of the clearing where my fateful camping trip had begun, I paused. The world of humans lay just beyond these trees, a world I could no longer truly be part of. With a heavy heart, I turned back to the deep woods that were now my domain. "May the gods forgive me," I whispered, "for I fear I will never forgive myself." And with those words, I melted into the shadows of the forest, ready to begin my dark work as its unwilling ambassador. The bargain had been struck, and there was no turning back now. Weeks passed in a blur as I struggled to maintain my sanity. The eyes were always watching, even in the light of day. I could feel their constant presence, judging my every action. The forest's whispers never ceased, a constant susurration in the back of my mind that made it impossible to remember my life before. I had taken to wandering the outskirts of my new domain, watching hikers and campers from afar. Their carefree laughter and easy smiles were like knives in my heart, reminders of everything I had lost. But I dared not approach them, fearing what the forest might compel me to do. It was on one of these patrols that I first saw them, a group of rowdy campers, their voices carrying through the trees long before I caught sight of them. As I drew closer, hidden in the shadows of ancient oaks, I felt the forest's anger rising like a tide. "Look at this place, dude," one of the young men shouted, crushing a beer can in his fist. "Perfect spot to party," his companions cheered, already unpacking more alcohol and setting up their tents with little care for the undergrowth they trampled. I watched in growing horror as they tossed cigarette butts onto the forest floor and carved their initials into the bark of a nearby tree. "Stop," I whispered, though I knew they couldn't hear me. "Please, you don't know what you're doing." But they continued their revelry, oblivious to the danger they were in. With each act of desecration, I could feel the forest's rage building. The very air seemed to thicken with malevolent energy. As night fell, their party grew louder and more raucous. Empty beer cans littered the ground, and the acrid smell of marijuana smoke drifted through the trees. It was then that I heard it, the voice of the forest spirit, cold and merciless in my mind. "It is time, Sarah," it hissed. "Show us your loyalty. Punish these defilers." I shook my head, backing away from the campsite. "No, please. They're just kids. They don't understand." The spirit's laughter echoed through the trees, sending small animals scurrying for cover. "Understanding is not required for justice. You made a bargain, little guardian. Now fulfill it." I felt my body begin to move of its own accord, drawn inexorably toward the unsuspecting campers. Tendrils of mist swirled around me, cloaking me in supernatural power. My vision sharpened, the darkness of the forest no longer an obstacle. As I approached their campsite, one of the young women noticed me first. Her eyes widened in shock and fear. "Guys," she said, her voice trembling, "there's someone out there." The others turned to look, their drunken laughter dying on their lips as they saw me emerge from the shadows. I knew what they must be seeing. A figure more plant than human, eyes glowing with an unearthly green light. "Who? What are you?" one of the men asked, stumbling to his feet. I opened my mouth to warn them, to beg them to run, but the words that came out were not my own. "I am the forest's vengeance," I heard myself say, my voice resonating with inhuman power. "You have trespassed and desecrated this sacred place. Now you will pay the price." What followed was a symphony of screams and breaking bones. The forest itself came alive around us, roots erupting from the ground to entangle the fleeing campers. trees bent and swayed, their branches becoming grasping arms that plucked the humans from the earth. I moved among them like a wraith, my newfound powers manifesting in terrifying ways. Vines sprouted from my fingertips, wrapping around throats and limbs. The very air seemed to obey my commands, choking and disorienting my victims. Through it all, I was a prisoner in my own body, screaming silently as I watched myself commit these atrocities. I felt every moment of their terror, every ounce of their pain. And worst of all, I felt the forest's savage joy at their suffering. When it was over, when the last echoes of screams had faded from the night air, I stood alone in the devastated campsite. The bodies of the campers were gone, absorbed into the earth and trees around me. All that remained were a few scraps of torn clothing and the detritus of their interrupted party. As the forest's influence receded, leaving me in control of my body once more, the full weight of what I had done came crashing down upon me. I fell to my knees, retching and sobbing. "What have I become?" I wailed, my cries echoing through the now silent woods. The forest spirit's voice whispered in my ear, smug and satisfied. "You have become what you were always meant to be, Sarah. Our protector, our avenger." I shook my head, desperately trying to deny the truth. But the evidence was all around me. The forest hummed with renewed energy, feeding off the life force of those I had helped destroy. And deep within myself, past the horror and self-loathing, I felt a spark of dark satisfaction. "No," I whispered, even as I felt that spark growing. "This isn't right." But the forest paid no heed to my moral qualms. It had tasted blood, and I knew with chilling certainty that it would demand more. As dawn broke over the trees, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, I rose to my feet. My body, which had seemed so foreign during the night's violence, now felt charged with power. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a puddle of spilled beer. My eyes, once a mundane brown, now glowed with the same eerie green light as the forest spirits. My skin had taken on a bark-like texture, and leaves sprouted from my hair. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I was no longer fully human. In fulfilling my bargain with the forest, I had lost a crucial part of myself. And the most terrifying thing was, a growing part of me didn't care. As I melted back into the shadows of my new domain, leaving no trace of the night's horrors, I felt the forest's approval washing over me. I had passed my first test, proving my loyalty and usefulness. But I knew it was only the beginning. What horrors would I be forced to commit in the name of these vengeful spirits? And how long would it be before I stopped seeing them as horrors at all? These questions haunted me as I retreated deeper into the woods, already dreading the next time the forest would call upon me to be its instrument of vengeance. My desperate attempts to warn others away from the forest only seemed to draw more curious souls to their doom. Each time I was forced to unleash the forest's wrath, a piece of my humanity withered away. The days blurred together, an endless cycle of violence and regret. I stood at the edge of the forest, watching a group of hikers make their way along the trail. Their bright clothing and cheerful chatter seemed obscene against the backdrop of ancient, brooding trees. "Turn back," I whispered, knowing they couldn't hear me. "Please, for your own sake, turn back." But they continued on, oblivious to the danger they were in. I felt the familiar stirring of the forest's hunger, the insistent pull to act. With a heavy heart, I stepped out onto the path, revealing myself to the unsuspecting group. Their reactions were predictable: shock, followed quickly by fear. I knew what they saw: a creature more plant than human, eyes glowing with an unearthly light. "Stop right there," I called out, my voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. "This forest is not safe for your kind. Turn back now while you still can." One of the hikers, a middle-aged man with a salt and pepper beard, stepped forward. "Who are you? What's going on here?" I could feel the forest's impatience growing, its desire to claim these intruders intensifying with each passing moment. I struggled against its influence, trying to maintain control. "I am the guardian of this place," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "And I'm telling you, for your own good, to leave immediately. There are things in these woods that you don't understand." A young woman in the group laughed nervously. "Is this some kind of joke? A publicity stunt for the park?" I shook my head, feeling my control slipping. "This is no joke. Your lives are in danger. Please, I'm begging you, turn around and never come back." The bearded man frowned, reaching for his phone. "I'm calling the Rangers. This is ridiculous." As he dialed, I felt the last of my restraint crumble. The forest surged through me, its ancient power overwhelming my feeble resistance. My body moved of its own accord, arms outstretched as vines erupted from the ground around us. "I tried to warn you," I heard myself say, my voice no longer my own. "Now you will become one with the forest." What followed was a scene of utter chaos. The hikers screamed and tried to flee, but the forest had already sprung its trap. Trees bent and swayed, their branches becoming grasping arms. The very earth seemed to come alive, swallowing those who fell. I moved among them like a vengeful spirit, my newfound powers manifesting in terrifying ways. With each life I took, I felt a surge of dark ecstasy. The forest fed on their fear and pain, growing stronger with each passing moment. When it was over, when the last echoes of screams had faded from the air, I stood alone amidst the devastation. The hikers were gone, absorbed into the very fabric of the forest. All that remained were a few scraps of brightly colored clothing, already being reclaimed by the undergrowth. As the forest's influence receded, leaving me in control once more, I waited for the familiar wave of horror and self-loathing to wash over me. But this time it didn't come. Instead, I felt a grim satisfaction, a sense of a job well done. "What's happening to me?" I whispered, staring at my hands. They were more branch-like now, my fingers elongated and tipped with sharp wooden points. The forest's voice whispered in my mind, smug and pleased. "You are evolving, Sarah, becoming more than you ever were as a mere human." I nodded slowly, realizing with a start that I agreed. The person I had been, weak, conflicted, bound by human morality, was fading away. In her place was something new, something powerful. As I made my way deeper into the woods, I caught sight of my reflection in a still pool. My eyes, once a source of horror to me, now seemed beautiful. Their eerie green glow was a sign of my connection to the forest, a badge of honor. "I understand now," I said to the trees around me. "This is who I was always meant to be." The forest hummed with approval, its ancient consciousness brushing against my mind like a caress. I had finally accepted my role, embraced my new existence fully. From that day forward, I no longer fought against the forest's demands. When hikers or campers strayed into our domain, I took a perverse pleasure in luring them deeper, in watching the moment they realized their peril. Their screams became a sweet melody to my ears, their fear an intoxicating perfume. Months passed and my legend grew. I became a boogeyman, a cautionary tale told around campfires. Some brave or foolish souls even sought me out deliberately, drawn by the thrill of danger or the desire to prove the stories false. They all met the same fate, feeding the insatiable hunger of the forest. But the forest was still not satisfied. It hungered for more, pushing me to expand our territory. Towns that had stood for generations found themselves besieged by encroaching wilderness. Those who resisted faced horrors beyond imagination. I watched impassively as civilization crumbled before the inexorable tide of green. Highways were swallowed by dense undergrowth. Buildings crumbled as roots tore through their foundations. The eyes of the forest were everywhere now, a vast network of sentinels enforcing nature's dominion. And at the center of it all was me, the human who had damned her entire species. I no longer felt guilt or remorse for my actions. Instead, I reveled in my power, in the knowledge that I was reshaping the world according to the forest's ancient design. As I stood atop a hill, Surveying the sea of green that had once been a thriving city, I felt a sense of completion. The corruption that had started in my heart had spread, transforming not just me, but the entire world around me. "Is this what you wanted?" I asked the forest, my voice carrying on the wind. The response came not in words, but in a wave of satisfaction and triumph that washed over me. Yes, this was exactly what the forest had wanted. And as I gazed out at the new world we had created, I knew that I wanted it too. The age of man was over. The age of the forest had begun. And I, its faithful guardian, would ensure that it lasted for eternity. Months turned to years, and my legend grew. I became a boogeyman, a cautionary tale told around campfires. But the forest was still not satisfied. It hungered for more, pushing me to expand our territory. Towns that had stood for generations were swallowed by the encroaching wilderness. Those who resisted found themselves facing horrors beyond imagination. I stood at the edge of what was once a bustling suburb, now a tangle of vines and overgrown trees. The last holdouts huddled in their crumbling homes, stubbornly clinging to the remnants of their former lives. I could smell their fear, hear the frantic beating of their hearts. It was intoxicating. Why do they resist? I mused aloud, my voice a rasp of creaking branches and rustling leaves. Can't they see the futility of their struggle? The forest's consciousness brushed against my mind, its ancient wisdom filling me with purpose. They fear change, my child, but change they must or perish. I nodded, feeling the surge of power that always preceded our conquests. With a gesture, I sent tendrils of mist creeping towards the houses, carrying spores that would take root in the minds of those within. A man burst out of the nearest home, wild-eyed and brandishing a shotgun. "Stay back, you monster!" he shouted, his voice cracking with terror. I tilted my head, regarding him with glowing green eyes. Monster? I am nature's retribution, the forest's vengeance made flesh. You are the monster here, with your concrete and steel, your pollution and greed. He fired, the buckshot tearing through my body. But where once there would have been blood and pain, now there was only sap and the rustle of leaves knitting my wounds closed. "Your weapons cannot harm me," I said, advancing on him. "The forest protects its own." As I reached out to touch him, vines erupted from the ground, wrapping around his legs and arms. He screamed, a sound that was quickly muffled as the vegetation forced its way into his mouth. "Shh," I whispered almost tenderly. "Soon you'll understand. Soon you'll be part of something greater than yourself." I watched impassively as he was pulled into the earth, his body becoming fertilizer for the hungry roots below. One by one, the other residents met similar fates, their resistance crumbling in the face of our inexorable advance. As dawn broke, the former suburb was unrecognizable. Trees burst through asphalt, flowers bloomed where manicured lawns once stood. The forest had reclaimed what was rightfully its own. I made my way to the center of town, where a small group of survivors had barricaded themselves in the local church. I could hear their prayers, their pleas for divine intervention. It was almost amusing. "Your gods cannot save you," I called out, my voice echoing unnaturally. "There is only the forest now. Surrender, and your transition will be painless. Resist, and—" I let the threat hang in the air, savoring their increased panic. The door burst open, and a woman emerged, her eyes blazing with a mixture of fear and defiance. "We'll never surrender to you," she spat. "This is our home. We've lived here for generations. You can't just take it." I felt a flicker of something, pity perhaps, or a distant memory of my own humanity. But it was quickly swallowed by the forest's insatiable hunger. "Your ancestors took this land from the forest," I replied, my voice cold. "We are merely reclaiming what was always ours. Your generations are nothing compared to the eons the forest has existed." With a wave of my hand, the ground beneath the church began to shift. Roots burst through the floorboards, wrapping around pillars and pews. The survivors' screams were music to my ears as the building was slowly pulled apart, exposing them to the forest's embrace. As the last of them were absorbed into the greenery, I felt the forest satisfaction wash over me. Another town conquered, another step towards our ultimate goal. I watched impassively as civilization crumbled before the inexorable tide of green. Those who embraced the change were allowed to live on as part of the forest consciousness. Those who fought, well, they nourished the soil all the same. The eyes of the forest were everywhere now, a vast network of sentinels enforcing nature's dominion. Every tree, every blade of grass, every insect and bird, all were extensions of our will. Humanity's reign was coming to an end, and a new era of green was dawning. And at the center of it all was me, the human who had damned her entire species. I no longer felt guilt or remorse for my actions. I had transcended such petty emotions. I was an avatar of nature's wrath, an instrument of cosmic balance. As I stood atop a hill overlooking what was once a sprawling metropolis, now a dense jungle teeming with life, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The air was clean, the water pure. The cacophony of urban life had been replaced by the symphony of birdsong and rustling leaves. "Is this not better?" I asked the wind. "Is this not how the world was meant to be?" The forest's response was a surge of approval that made the very ground tremble. We had done well, it seemed to say, but our work was not yet finished. In the distance, I could see the faint glow of other cities, other bastions of human resistance. They too would fall in time. The forest's patience was infinite, its resolve unshakable. As I set off towards the next conquest, I spared a final thought for the person I once was. Sarah, the carefree hiker who had stumbled into this fate. She was gone now, consumed by the forest's will, and in her place stood something far greater, far more terrible. I was the reckoning, the green tide that would sweep away the old world and usher in a new age of primal harmony. And woe betide any who stood in our way. As I stand here now, centuries later, I barely remember the woman I once was. The forest has consumed me utterly, my flesh and bones replaced by bark and sap. I am an ancient thing, as timeless as the trees themselves. My glowing eyes pierce the darkness, ever watchful for those who would disturb our realm. The world has changed beyond recognition. Cities have crumbled, their ruins reclaimed by the relentless tide of green. Humanity, once the dominant species, now exists in small, scattered tribes, living in harmony with the forest or face swift retribution. I move silently through the undergrowth, my form shifting and blending with the vegetation around me. The forest is quiet tonight, but I can sense a disturbance on the edge of our territory. As I approach, I hear voices, human voices. My interest peaks. It's been decades since I've encountered anyone brave or foolish enough to venture this deep into our domain. "Are you sure this is the right way, Jack?" a woman's voice asks, tinged with fear and exhaustion. "The map says the old city should be just beyond these trees," a man replies, his confidence masking an undercurrent of uncertainty. "If the legends are true, we'll find technology there that could help our village." I smile to myself, a cruel twist of branches and leaves. How little they understand. The old cities are death traps, their decaying structures home to horrors these humans couldn't begin to imagine. Silently, I position myself in their path, allowing my form to solidify into something vaguely humanoid. My eyes begin to glow, two pinpricks of eerie green light in the darkness. The humans freeze as they spot me, their flashlight beams dancing erratically as their hands shake. "Oh God," the woman whimpers. It's her, the forest spirit. The man, Jack, steps forward, his voice quavering despite his attempt at bravery. We mean no harm. We're just passing through." I tilt my head, regarding them with ancient, inhuman eyes. "There is no passing through, my forest," I say, my voice a whisper of wind through leaves. "All who enter become part of it, one way or another." The woman clutches at Jack's arm. "Please," she begs. "We have children back at our village. They'll starve without our help. For a moment, I feel a flicker of something long forgotten. Compassion, empathy, but it's quickly swallowed by the vast, implacable will of the forest. Your children, I muse, circling the terrified humans. Tell me about them. Jack swallows hard. We have a son and daughter, twins. They're only 5. As he speaks, I catch glimpses of his memories. Laughing children, a small community struggling to survive in a world reclaimed by nature. For the briefest instant, I remember my own past. A life long ago when I too was human. 5 years old, I say softly. So young, so adaptable. The humans exchange worried glances, sensing the dangerous turn in the conversation. What do you mean? The woman asks, her voice barely a whisper. I feel the forest's hunger rising within me, its insatiable desire to grow, to consume. Your children could have a place here, I say. They could become one with the forest as I did. Immortal, powerful, free from the struggles of your fleeting human existence. Horror dawns on their faces as they realize what I'm proposing. Jack steps in front of the woman protectively. Never, he growls. We'll die before we let you take our children. I laugh, a sound like rustling leaves and cracking branches. Oh, you misunderstand. I'm not asking for your permission. With a gesture, roots erupt from the ground, wrapping around their legs. They cry out, struggling against the inexorable pull of the earth. Please, the woman sobs. Have mercy. The word strikes a chord deep within me. Mercy. When was the last time I had shown mercy? When was the last time I had felt anything other than the forest's eternal hunger? I pause, my hand outstretched as I prepare to complete their transformation. In that moment of hesitation, memories flood back. Memories of who I once was, of the horror I felt when I first became the forest's instrument. What have I become? I whisper, more to myself than to the terrified humans before me. The forest's voice rises in my mind, insistent and angry. You are what you were meant to be, it hisses. Finish them. But for the first time in centuries, I resist. No, I say aloud, my voice gaining strength. No more. The roots recede, releasing the stunned humans. They look at me with a mixture of fear and confusion. Go, I tell them, my form already beginning to fade back into the forest. Take your children and leave this place. Never return. They don't need to be told twice. As they flee, I feel the forest's rage building around me. The price of my defiance will be steep, I know. But in this moment, I've reclaimed a small piece of my humanity. As I dissolve back into the wilderness, I ponder the nature of my existence. I am ancient, powerful, but at what cost? The forest has given me immortality, but it has taken everything else. Sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, I recall a time before the endless green. But those memories fade with each passing year, lost to the whispers of the wind through leaves. I have become the very thing I once feared, a guardian spirit of the forest, luring unwary travelers with my haunting glow. And yet perhaps there is hope. Perhaps after all these centuries I can find a balance between the forest's will and my own fading humanity. As dawn breaks, I watch another group of hikers approach the forest's edge. I feel the familiar hunger rising within me, the urge to consume and transform. But this time I resist. Turn back, I whisper on the wind. This forest is not for you. They pause, looking around in confusion. One of them shivers. Did you hear that? He asks his companions. I've got a bad feeling about this place. As they debate whether to continue, I fade deeper into the woods. The forest's anger simmers around me, but I stand firm. I am its guardian, yes, but perhaps I can guard it without destroying everything in my path. For in this forest, every pair of eyes tells a story, and mine is just one among countless others, stretching back to the dawn of time itself. But perhaps, just perhaps, my story isn't over yet. Perhaps there are still chapters to be written, choices to be made. The price of immortality has been steep, but as I look out over the vast expanse of green that is my domain, I wonder if redemption might still be possible. Only time will tell, and time at least is something I have in abundance. As the echoes of this haunting tale fade into the whispers of the forest, we find ourselves drawn deeper into the shadows of the unknown. The Guardian story may have reached its twilight, but the night is still young, and the woods hold many more secrets. Brace yourself, dear listener, for our next account is about to begin. In the distance, a twig snaps and a new set of glowing eyes emerges from the darkness. What terrors await us in this next chapter of our journey through the supernatural? Let us venture forth and discover. The mist clung to my skin as I trudged deeper into the heart of Olympic National Park. Towering evergreens stretched towards a sky I could barely glimpse through the dense canopy. I'd always found solace in these woods, but today felt different. The air hung heavy, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. I paused to catch my breath, leaning against the rough bark of an ancient cedar. That's when I first heard it. A whisper so faint I thought I'd imagined it. Mike. I whipped my head around, searching for the source. Hello, I called out, my voice sounding small in the vast wilderness. No response came. Shaking off the unease, I continued my hike. The path narrowed, winding between moss-covered boulders and fallen logs. With each step, the forest seemed to close in around me. Mike. There it was again, louder this time. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't my imagination. The whisper seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Who's there? I demanded, my heart racing. This isn't funny. Silence answered me, but it was a silence that felt alive, watching, waiting. I quickened my pace, no longer caring about the beauty that surrounded me. I just wanted to get back to my car, back to civilization. The whispers grew more insistent, a chorus of voices that seemed to emanate from the very trees themselves. Mike, Mike, Mike. I broke into a run, branches whipping at my face as I veered off the trail. Panic clouded my judgment. I no longer knew which direction I was heading. I only knew I had to escape those voices. Suddenly, my foot caught on an exposed root, sending me sprawling to the forest floor. I lay there, winded, leaves and dirt sticking to my sweat-soaked clothes. Mike. The whisper was right next to my ear now, as clear as if someone were standing over me. Something inside me snapped. Anger overtook fear. I pushed myself to my feet, glaring at the surrounding trees. What do you want? I shouted. I'm here. I'm listening. The words had barely left my lips when an unnatural hush fell over the forest. No birds chirped. No insects buzzed. Even the ever-present sound of wind through leaves ceased entirely. The silence was absolute and terrifying. In that moment, I realized I'd made a catastrophic mistake. By acknowledging the whispers, by responding to them, I'd opened a door that was never meant to be opened. The air grew thick, almost syrupy. Breathing became difficult. I stumbled forward, desperate to find my way back to the trail, but the landscape had changed. Trees that I could have sworn weren't there moments ago blocked my path. Shadows deepened, taking on strange, writhing shapes. Hello? I called out again, my voice trembling. Is anyone there? I need help. Only the suffocating silence answered. As I pushed through a tangle of ferns, I emerged into a small clearing. In the center stood a massive tree, its trunk gnarled and twisted into an almost human-like form. Tendrils of mist swirled around its base, reaching out towards me like grasping fingers. A deep, resonant voice filled my head, drowning out all other thoughts. You have answered our call, Michael. You have been chosen. I fell to my knees, clutching my head. Chosen for what? I managed to gasp. To bridge the gap. To become one with the forest. Images flashed through my mind. Roots burrowing into flesh, bark spreading across skin, leaves unfurling from human limbs. I saw myself transformed, neither fully human nor fully tree. A hybrid creature born of two worlds. "No," I whispered, horrified. "I don't want this. Please, let me go." The voice continued, relentless. "It is too late. The process has begun. Embrace your destiny, Michael. Become our voice. Become our vengeance." I scrambled to my feet, turning to flee, but the trees had closed ranks behind me. There was nowhere to run. The mist thickened, wrapping around my legs, my torso, my neck. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. As consciousness began to fade, one terrifying truth crystallized in my mind. The forest had always been my sanctuary, but now it had become my prison. And I, in my foolishness, had locked myself in. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was my own hand, held out in a futile gesture of defense. And there, pushing through the skin of my palm, was the tiniest green shoot of a newly forming leaf. The abrupt hush that fell over the forest was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. One moment the woods had been alive with the usual symphony of nature, birds calling, insects buzzing, leaves rustling in the breeze. The next, it was as if someone had pressed a cosmic mute button. I stood frozen, straining my ears for any sound, no matter how faint. There was nothing. Even my own heartbeat seemed muffled, as though the very air was absorbing all vibrations. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding flat and lifeless in the stillness. No echo returned. It was as if the sound had been swallowed up mere inches from my lips. A bead of sweat trickled down my spine. This wasn't right. This wasn't natural. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I found myself rooted to the spot, terror paralyzing my limbs. As the silence stretched on, I became acutely aware of a presence in the forest. It wasn't something I could see or hear, but rather a feeling, an overwhelming sense that I was being watched. No, not just watched, studied, evaluated. I forced myself to take a step forward, then another. The crunch of leaves under my boots should have been deafening in the silence, but even that sound was subdued, as if the forest floor was actively working to muffle my movements. "Is anyone there?" I tried again, my voice cracking. "Please, if someone's playing a joke, it's not funny anymore." Only the oppressive silence answered. As I moved deeper into the woods, desperately searching for a way out, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The fallen twigs and branches on the forest floor were moving. Not blown by wind, there wasn't even the slightest breeze, but rearranging themselves of their own accord. I watched, transfixed with horror, as the twigs slowly formed shapes on the ground. At first, they seemed random, but as I continued walking, I realized they were forming the same symbol over and over, a crude representation of a tree with a human figure somehow melded into its trunk. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, my composure finally shattering. My words seemed to hang in the air, vibrating with an unnatural resonance. A low rumble answered, not a sound, but a vibration I felt in my bones. The trees around me swayed despite the lack of wind. Their branches reached towards me, grasping, hungry. I broke into a run, heedless of direction, simply trying to escape the unseen force that permeated the forest. But no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling of being pursued. The silence pressed in on me, as tangible as a physical weight. Bursting into a small clearing, I stumbled to a halt. There, in the center, stood an ancient, gnarled tree. Its trunk was twisted into an almost human-like shape, its branches reaching out like beseeching arms. As I stared, transfixed, I could have sworn I saw faces in the bark, tortured, screaming visages that appeared and vanished in the blink of an eye. A voice suddenly filled my head, not breaking the silence, but somehow communicating directly into my mind. "You have been chosen, Michael. You answered our call. Now you must become one with us." "No!" I screamed, clapping my hands over my ears. "This isn't real. This can't be happening." "It is very real," the voice continued, implacable. "For too long, humanity has ravaged the natural world. Now nature fights back. And you, Michael, will be our instrument." I felt something brush against my ankle and looked down to see roots. actual tree roots, emerging from the soil, wrapping around my legs. I tried to move, to run, but I was held fast. "Please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "I don't want this. Let me go." "It is too late," the voice replied, its tone almost sorrowful. "The process has begun. Embrace your new existence, Michael. Become our voice in a world that has forgotten how to listen to the whispers of the trees." The roots continued their inexorable climb up my body. I could feel changes beginning inside me. A stretching, a reorganizing of my very cellular structure. Where my fingers brushed against my face, I felt not smooth skin, but rough bark. As my transformation progressed, the unnatural silence began to lift. But the sounds that returned were not the familiar noises of the forest. Instead, I heard whispers, countless voices speaking in languages both ancient and new. I realized with dawning horror that I could understand them all. The trees were speaking. The entire forest was alive and aware in a way I'd never imagined possible. And now, I was becoming a part of it. As my consciousness began to merge with the vast interconnected network of the forest, one last human thought flitted through my mind. The trees had whispered my name, and when I answered, the forest fell silent. But that silence was just the prelude to a symphony of secrets I was now cursed to hear for eternity. Days blurred into weeks as I tried desperately to convince myself that my encounter in Olympic National Park had been nothing more than a vivid nightmare. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something fundamental had changed within me, and there was no going back. It started with an itch, a maddening crawling sensation just beneath my skin. I'd scratch until I drew blood, but the relief was only temporary. In the mirror, I began to notice subtle changes, my skin taking on a rougher texture, my eyes developing an unsettling greenish tinge. "You're just stressed," my girlfriend Sarah insisted one morning as I examined my reflection for the 100th time. "Maybe you should see a doctor." I shook my head, knowing no doctor could help me. "It's nothing," I lied. "I'm sure it'll pass." But it didn't pass. It got worse. One night, I woke up in agony, feeling as if my entire body was on fire. I stumbled to the bathroom, flicked on the light, and nearly screamed at what I saw. Tiny rootlets were pushing their way out of my skin, waving in the air like miniature tentacles before burrowing back beneath the surface. "Sarah!" I yelled, panic overwhelming me. "Sarah, wake up!" She rushed in, eyes wide with concern. "Mike, what's wrong?" I turned to her, ready to show her the horror of my transformation. But to my shock, my skin looked normal again. The roots had vanished without a trace. I thought I saw... I trailed off, confused and frightened. Sarah's face softened with pity. "Honey, I think you need help. These nightmares, the paranoia, it's not healthy." I nodded numbly, knowing I couldn't explain what was really happening. How could I tell her that the forest had chosen me? That I was becoming something no longer fully human? As the days wore on, I found myself drawn to plants and trees, feeling a strange kinship with them that both thrilled and terrified me. In quiet moments, I could swear I heard whispers, snippets of an ancient language that spoke of root systems and nutrient exchanges, of seasons long past and futures yet to unfold. One afternoon, while walking in a local park, I found myself standing before a massive oak tree. Without thinking, I placed my hand on its trunk. Immediately, a flood of information rushed into my mind. The tree's long history, its struggles against disease and drought, its silent witnesses to countless human dramas played out beneath its branches. "I can hear you," I whispered, awestruck. A voice ancient and resonant filled my head. "Of course you can, young one. You are becoming one of us." I jerked my hand away, heart pounding. An elderly woman walking her dog gave me a concerned look. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked. I managed a weak smile. "Yes, thank you. Just, talking to the trees." She chuckled, clearly thinking I was joking, and continued on her way. If only she knew the truth. That night I dreamed of vast forests, of roots intertwining deep beneath the earth, forming a communication network more complex than any human creation. I saw myself as part of this network. My consciousness spread across countless trees, experiencing the world in ways I could never have imagined. I woke with a gasp, my body drenched in sweat. In the dim light of dawn, I could see small leaves sprouting from my forearms, their delicate green contrasting sharply with my pale skin. As I watched in horror and fascination, they slowly receded, leaving no trace behind. "What's happening to me?" I whispered to the empty room. A chorus of voices answered, seeming to come from the potted plants on my windowsill. "You are evolving, Michael, becoming more than you were. Embrace the change." I buried my face in my hands, torn between terror and a growing sense of wonder. Part of me wanted to fight this transformation with every fiber of my being, but another part, a part that grew stronger each day, yearned to surrender to it, to fully become this new hybrid creature. Sarah found me like that, huddled on the bed, shaking. Mike, what's wrong?" I looked up at her, seeing the worry etched on her face. In that moment, I realized I had to tell her everything, consequences be damned. I couldn't bear to face this alone anymore. "Sarah," I said, my voice trembling, "there's something I need to show you, something I need to tell you, but you have to promise not to freak out." She sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. "You're scaring me, Mike." "What is it?" Taking a deep breath, I focused on the sensation I'd been fighting for weeks. I felt the change ripple through me, watched as bark-like patches spread across my skin, as tiny leaves unfurled from my fingertips. Sarah's eyes widened in shock, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Mike, what's happened to you?" "I'm becoming something else," I said, surprised by the calmness in my voice. "The forest chose me, and I don't know if I can stop it or if I even want to anymore." As Sarah stared at me, horror mixing with fascination in her eyes, I felt a profound shift within myself. I was no longer just Mike, the human. I was a bridge between two worlds, a chosen vessel for an ancient power reawakening in the face of environmental destruction. And as terrifying as that was, a part of me thrilled at the possibilities that lay ahead. The forest had chosen me. Now I had to choose what to do with this strange, terrible gift. As weeks turned into months, I found myself straddling two realities, caught in a nightmarish limbo between the human world I'd always known and the ancient primal realm of nature that was slowly claiming me. My transformation progressed, each day bringing new horrors and wonders that left me questioning my very identity. One morning, I woke to find my bed covered in fallen leaves. They weren't from any nearby trees. They had shed from my own skin during the night. I scooped them up, marveling at their delicate veins and vibrant colors. "What am I becoming?" I whispered, a mixture of awe and terror in my voice. The plants on my windowsill seemed to lean towards me, their leaves rustling without any breeze. A chorus of whispers filled my mind. "You are becoming more, embracing your true nature. Don't fight it, Michael." I shook my head, trying to clear the voices. "But I'm human," I argued, even as I felt the lie in those words. The voices grew insistent, a cacophony of rustling leaves and creaking branches. "You were human. Now you are the bridge, the vessel, the voice of the forest in a world that has forgotten how to listen." I pressed my palms against my ears, but it did nothing to silence the voices that came from within. Memories of my human life, my job, my friends, my family, began to feel distant, like fading photographs. In their place, new knowledge flooded my mind. The intricate language of root systems, the slow pulse of sap through ancient trunks, the silent scream of a forest burning thousands of miles away. "Stop!" I cried out. "I can't handle this, it's too much." Suddenly, a different voice cut through the chaos. A human voice. Sarah, my girlfriend, stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with concern and a touch of fear. Mike? Who are you talking to? I looked up at her, realizing how I must appear. Leaves in my hair, bark-like patches spreading across my skin, talking to thin air. I don't know anymore, Sarah. I don't know who or what I am. She approached cautiously, sitting on the edge of the bed. Talk to me, please. Help me understand what's happening to you. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. How could I explain the inexplicable? It's like I'm being pulled in two directions. Part of me is still here, still human. But another part is elsewhere, connected to something vast and ancient. I can feel the forests, Sarah. All of them. Their joy, their pain, their anger. Sarah reached out, hesitating for a moment before taking my hand. I could feel her shock at the texture of my skin, no longer fully human. Can't we get help? There must be someone, a doctor, a scientist, who can reverse this. I shook my head sadly. I don't think this can be reversed, and I'm not sure I want it to be. The admission surprised me as much as it did her. What do you mean? Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. I struggled to find the words. It's terrifying, yes, but it's also incredible. I'm experiencing the world in ways I never imagined possible. Did you know that trees communicate? That forests are like vast, interconnected societies? I can feel it all, Sarah. I'm part of something so much bigger than myself. As if to emphasize my point, a small branch began to sprout from my forearm, leaves unfurling before our eyes. Sarah gasped, but didn't pull away. But what about us, she asked, tears welling in her eyes. What about our plans? Our future? Her words hit me like a physical blow. I realized with a pang of guilt that as I'd been grappling with my transformation, I'd been pulling away from her, from all the human connections that had once defined my life. I don't know, I admitted, feeling tears of my own forming. I want to say that nothing has to change, but that would be a lie. Everything has changed, Sarah. I'm changing. And I don't know where this path leads. As we sat there, both of us crying, I felt a surge of competing impulses. Part of me wanted to cling to my humanity, to fight against the transformation with every fiber of my being. But another part yearned to surrender fully to the call of the forest, to leave behind the limitations of human existence and embrace a new form of consciousness. In the silence of the room, I could hear the agonized cries of others who had gone through this before me, their essences now trapped within gnarled trunks, their human memories fading like mist. Was that to be my fate as well? I'm scared, I whispered, as much to Sarah as to myself. She squeezed my hand, her touch a lifeline to the human world. We'll figure this out together, she said, though I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. As night fell, I stood by the window looking out at the city streets below. The urban landscape seemed alien to me now, a world of concrete and steel so far removed from the forests that called to me. Yet I couldn't fully let it go. I was a creature of two worlds now, blessed or cursed to understand both, but belong fully to neither. The moon rose, its light filtering through leaves that shouldn't be there, leaves sprouting from my own body. In that moment, torn between worlds, I realized that my journey was far from over. The true test lay ahead. Finding a way to bridge the gap between humanity and nature, to be a voice for the voiceless forests in a world that had forgotten how to listen. As I turned from the window, I caught my reflection. A face no longer fully human, eyes glowing with an inner light. The weight of ancient wisdom and terrible responsibility etched into every feature. The human Mike was fading like a dream upon waking. What would take his place? Only time would tell. The city lights flickered like distant stars as I stood on my apartment balcony, a stranger in a world I once called home. The concrete jungle sprawled before me, a stark contrast to the lush forests that now occupied my dreams and, increasingly, my waking reality. I had fled here, hoping the urban landscape would shield me from nature's relentless grasp. But I was wrong. Even here, surrounded by steel and glass, I could feel the pull. Plants seemed to reach for me, vines creeping through cracks in the sidewalk, following my every step. I was neither fully human nor fully tree, a monster caught between worlds, belonging nowhere. A soft rustle caught my attention. I looked down to see a small potted plant on my balcony stretching its leaves towards me, as if seeking my touch. Without thinking, I reached out, my fingers, now more like slender branches, gently caressing its foliage. "Hello, little one," I whispered, feeling the plant's life force pulse through me. "Mike? Who are you talking to?" Sarah's voice startled me. She stood in the doorway, concern etched on her face. I pulled my hand back quickly, watching as the plant seemed to droop in disappointment. "No one," I lied, turning to face her. "Just thinking out loud." Sarah stepped closer, her eyes searching mine. "You're changing again, aren't you? I can see it." I nodded slowly, unable to deny the obvious. My skin had taken on a bark-like texture, and small leaves were sprouting from my shoulders. "It's getting harder to control," I admitted. She reached out, hesitating for a moment before touching my cheek. I could see the mix of love and fear in her eyes. "We need to do something, Mike. We can't keep living like this. You can't keep living like this." "What would you have me do?" I asked, a hint of bitterness creeping into my voice. "There's no cure for this, Sarah. No way to go back to who I was." "Then we adapt," she said firmly. "We find a way to make this work. There must be others like you out there. Maybe we can find them, learn from them." I shook my head, remembering the whispers I'd heard in the forest. "If there are others, they're not here anymore. They've fully transformed, become one with the trees." A look of determination crossed Sarah's face. "Then we'll be the first to find a balance. I'm not giving up on you, Mike. On us." Her words warmed something inside me, a flicker of my old humanity. But even as I reached for her, I felt the pull of the other world, the vast network of roots and leaves that called to me, promising power and connection beyond human understanding. A sudden gust of wind swept across the balcony, carrying with it the sense of soil and growing things. My senses, now far beyond human norm, picked up messages in those scents. Distress calls from a park across town where trees were being cut down. The joyous burst of new growth in a community garden. The slow decay of fallen leaves nourishing the earth. I staggered, overwhelmed by the sensory input. Sarah caught me, her human warmth a stark contrast to the cool, plant-like texture of my skin. "What is it?" she asked, worry clear in her voice. "What's happening?" "I can feel them," I gasped. "All of them. The trees, the plants. They're calling to me. They need me." Sarah's grip on my arms tightened. "No, Mike, I need you. Here, with me." I looked at her. This woman who had stood by me through this impossible transformation, who still saw the man beneath the monster I was becoming. And for a moment, I wanted nothing more than to be that man again, to shut out the voices of the green world and live a normal human life. But then another gust of wind brought more urgent messages. A forest fire starting hundreds of miles away, the silent scream of ancient trees being felled, the choked gasps of plants struggling to survive in polluted soil. The weight of it all pressed down on me, an unbearable responsibility. "I'm sorry," I whispered, feeling tears, or was it sap, running down my cheeks. "I don't think I can stay here anymore. The pull is too strong. They need me out there." Sarah's face crumpled, but she nodded slowly. "I know," she said, her voice barely audible. "I've seen it happening. You're slipping away, becoming something else. Something I can't follow." I cupped her face in my hands, marveling at how alien my own limbs looked now. "I love you," I said fiercely. "Never doubt that. But I'm not just me anymore. I'm part of something bigger, something I don't fully understand yet, and I have to see where this path leads." She leaned into my touch, closing her eyes, Will you come back? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. Would there be anything human left of me to come back? Would I even want to return to this world of concrete and machinery once I'd fully embraced my new nature? I don't know, I answered honestly, but I'll try. Somehow, I'll try to find a way to bridge these two worlds. As if in response to my words, I felt a surge of energy course through me. My transformation accelerated, bark spreading across my skin, branches sprouting from my back. The balcony floor cracked as roots burst from my feet, seeking soil. Sarah stepped back, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and horror. Mike. I gave her one last human smile before the change overtook me completely. Remember me, I managed to say as my mouth transformed, no longer capable of human speech. In my last moments of human consciousness, I saw Sarah nod, tears streaming down her face. Then the world shifted, my perception expanding to encompass the vast network of green life that pulsed around the city. I was no longer just Mike. I was the hybrid, the bridge between worlds. And as I felt my consciousness spread through roots and leaves across miles of green life, I knew my journey was only beginning. The human world had declared war on nature, and now nature was fighting back. My role in that fight was yet to be determined, but one thing was certain. I would never be the same again. As my understanding of the forest's true nature deepened, so did my terror. What had once seemed like a miraculous, if frightening, transformation was revealing itself to be something far more sinister. This wasn't just about creating a new hybrid species, it was about revenge. Centuries of deforestation and environmental destruction had awakened something primal and angry. Humanity had declared war on nature, and now nature was fighting back, using creatures like me as its soldiers. I stood at the edge of a clear-cut forest, my partially transformed body trembling with rage and sorrow. The stumps of ancient trees stretched before me like gravestones, their once mighty trunks reduced to lifeless cylinders. The earth itself seemed to weep, and I could feel its pain as if it were my own. Why? I whispered, falling to my knees. Why show me this? The wind rustled through the leaves that now grew from my shoulders, carrying with it a chorus of voices, the collective consciousness of the forest that had chosen me. To understand, they whispered back, to see what we have endured, what we continue to endure. Visions flooded my mind, centuries of logging, of forests burned to make way for agriculture, of trees choking on polluted air and dying from climate change-induced drought. I saw the intricate web of life that depended on these forests crumbling, species after species blinking out of existence. But this, turning people into hybrids, how does this help? I asked, struggling to comprehend the forest's plan. A deep, resonant voice, older and more powerful than the others, filled my head. We tried to communicate in gentler ways, through beauty, through the whisper of leaves and the song of birds. Humanity did not listen. Now, we must speak in a language they cannot ignore. I shook my head, trying to clear it of the overlapping voices and visions. But I'm just one person. What difference can I make? You are not alone, the ancient voice replied. As if on cue, I felt a presence behind me. I turned to see a figure emerging from the tree line. At first glance, they appeared human, but as they drew closer, I saw the bark-like skin, the leaves growing from their arms, the roots that seemed to sprout from their feet with each step. "Hello, brother," the figure said, their voice a strange mixture of human speech and rustling leaves. What are you?" I asked, stumbling back. The hybrid smiled, an eerily human expression on their transformed face. "I am like you, a bridge between worlds. My name was Elena once. Now, I am something more." "How many of us are there?" I whispered, a mix of horror and fascination washing over me. Elena's smile faded. "Not enough. Not yet. But our numbers grow with each passing day. The forests are desperate, you see. They're dying, and they're taking drastic measures to survive." I looked back at the clear-cut land before us. By turning humans into this? Elena nodded solemnly. We are the forest's last hope, its voice in a world that has forgotten how to listen to the whispers of the wind and the groaning of the earth. But what are we supposed to do? I asked, frustration building within me. We can't exactly walk into a board meeting or a government office looking like this. Elena's laugh was like the creaking of branches in a strong wind. Oh, but we can do so much more than that, brother. Watch. She stepped forward, placing her hand on the stump of a felled tree. Before my eyes, roots began to sprout from the dead wood, burrowing into the soil. Leaves and branches erupted from the top of the stump, growing at an impossible speed. Within minutes, a young tree stood where the stump had been. This is what we can do, Elena said, turning back to me. We can heal, we can regrow, and when necessary, we can destroy. A chill ran down my spine at her words. Destroy? Elena's eyes hardened, glowing with an inner green fire. The forests have been patient, brother. They have endured centuries of abuse. But that patience has run out. If humanity will not learn to live in harmony with nature, then nature will reclaim what was taken. The voices in my head grew louder, more insistent. I saw visions of cities overrun by rapidly growing plants, of concrete cracking under the relentless assault of roots and vines. I saw humans fleeing as the natural world reclaimed its territory with terrifying speed. This is wrong, I said, shaking my head. There has to be another way. We can't just destroy everything humans have built. Elena regarded me with a mixture of pity and frustration. And what would you suggest? That we stand by and watch as the last forests die? As the earth chokes on human pollution? No, brother. The time for half measures is long past. I felt torn, caught between my fading humanity and the primal force of nature that now flowed through my veins. There has to be a balance, I insisted. A way to coexist. Perhaps, Elena conceded. But that choice is no longer in our hands. We are instruments of the forest now. Its will is our will. As if to emphasize her point, I felt a surge of energy course through me. My transformation accelerated, bark spreading further across my skin, leaves sprouting from my back. The earth beneath my feet seemed to pulse with life, responding to my very presence. I realized then the true nature of what I had become, not just a hybrid creature, but a weapon in an ancient war. Nature's dark design was unfolding, and I was powerless to stop it. As Elena and I stood there, overlooking the scarred landscape, I couldn't help but wonder, in this battle between humanity and nature, was there any hope for reconciliation? Or were we doomed to be the harbingers of a new world order, one where the green tide would sweep away everything in its path? The forest whispered its answers in my mind, and I trembled at the implications. The war had begun, and I was on the front lines. The mist curled around my ankles, pulling me back towards the shadowy depths of the forest that had claimed me. I stood at the precipice of two worlds. Behind me, the whispers of ancient trees and the promise of unimaginable power. Before me, the fading lights of the human world I once called home. The weight of my decision pressed down upon me, as heavy as the fate of two entire worlds locked in a silent, savage war. Mike! Sarah's voice cut through the fog, both literal and metaphorical. She stood at the edge of the tree line, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. Please don't do this, don't go where I can't follow. I turned to face her, acutely aware of how monstrous I must appear. Bark covered most of my skin now, leaves sprouting from my shoulders and back. Roots threatened to burst from my feet with each step. Sarah, I said, my voice a strange mixture of human speech and rustling leaves. You don't understand. I have to do this. The forest. It needs me. She took a tentative step forward. And what about what you need? What about us? Her words pierced through the vegetative haze that had been clouding my mind. For a moment I saw flashes of the life we had planned together, a home, a family, a future. But those images were quickly overshadowed by visions of burning forests, choking smog, and a world gasping its last breaths. "I'm sorry," I whispered, feeling tears. Or was it sap running down my cheeks? "But this is bigger than us now. The world is dying, Sarah, and I might be able to help save it." A new voice joined our conversation, emanating from the depths of the forest behind me. "Indeed you can, Michael, but only if you fully embrace what you have become." I turned to see Elena emerging from the shadows, her hybrid form both beautiful and terrifying. Sarah gasped, stumbling backward at the sight. What are you?" Sarah stammered. Elena smiled, an eerily human expression on her transformed face. "We are the future, child, the bridge between your world and ours, and your beloved stands at a crossroads." I felt the pull of the forest intensify, branches and vines reaching out to me like welcoming arms. The whispers in my mind grew louder, more insistent. "Join us fully, Michael," Elena urged. "Let go of your last ties to humanity. Become the instrument of nature's will. With your power, we can restore balance to this world." "Balance?" Sarah scoffed, finding her voice. "You call this balance? Turning people into monsters?" Elena's eyes flashed with an inner green fire. "Monsters? We are the saviors of this planet. Humanity has had its chance, and it has failed. Now nature reclaims what was always hers." I stood between them, torn between two worlds, two futures. The choice before me seemed impossible. Embrace my new form completely, losing the last shreds of my humanity but gaining unimaginable power? Or fight against the transformation, knowing it might destroy me in the process? "Mike," Sarah pleaded, reaching out to me. "Remember who you are. Remember us. There has to be another way." Her touch sent a jolt through me, awakening memories of my human life. Laughter, love, the simple joys of existence. But it also brought pain, the knowledge of all I had lost, of all I could never be again. Elena's voice cut through my reverie. "There is no other way, Michael. The forest has chosen you for a reason. Embrace your destiny." I closed my eyes, feeling the life force of the forest pulse through me. I could sense every tree, every plant, their collective consciousness merging with my own. The power was intoxicating, the knowledge vast and ancient. But there was something else there too, a deep, abiding anger. The forest was not just seeking balance. It wanted revenge. Centuries of destruction and neglect had awakened something primal and terrifying. In that moment, I understood the true nature of the choice before me. It wasn't just about me, or even about Sarah. It was about the future of two worlds on a collision course. I opened my eyes, my decision made. "No," I said, my voice resonating with newfound power. "I won't be a weapon in this war," Elena hissed, leaves rustling angrily. "You would betray your own kind? Side with the destroyers?" "I'm not siding with anyone," I replied firmly. "I'm choosing a third path, one of true balance." I reached out, taking Sarah's hand in my bark-covered one. With my other hand, I grasped a low-hanging branch, feeling the forest's energy flow through me. "I am both human and tree," I declared. "I understand both worlds, and I will be the bridge between them. Not to destroy, but to heal." The forest around us seemed to hold its breath. Then slowly, I felt a shift in the energy. The anger didn't disappear, but it softened, tempered by something new. Hope. Elena watched me warily. "And how do you propose to do this, hybrid?" I smiled, feeling for the first time truly comfortable in my new form. "By teaching. By showing humanity the wonders and the needs of the natural world, and by showing the forest the potential for good in humanity." Sarah squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with tears and pride. "We'll do it together," she said softly. As the sun began to rise, casting golden light through the trees, I felt a sense of purpose settle over me. The path ahead would not be easy. Bridging the gap between two worlds at war would require all of my strength, all of my newfound powers. But as I stood there, one hand clasping my human love, and the other connected to the vast network of nature, I knew I had made the right choice. I was no longer just Mike, nor was I simply a vessel for the forest's will. I was something new, a true hybrid, with the power to change the course of two worlds. The final choice had been made. Now, the real work would begin. As we leave behind the transformative journey of Mike and his struggle between two worlds, we turn our attention to another tale from the growing tapestry of human nature encounters. Each story in this collection offers a unique perspective on the awakening consciousness of the natural world, and our next account comes from an unexpected source, shedding light on a different facet of this emerging phenomenon. As we prepare to delve into this new narrative, remember that the line between observer and participant in these extraordinary events is often blurred. So let us begin the next report, where the boundaries of science, belief, and the natural world are once again tested in ways none could have anticipated. The dense Ozark forest pressed in around me as I stumbled through the gathering gloom. Rain pelted my face, each icy droplet a stinging reminder of my foolishness. What had started as a simple day hike had turned into a nightmare of disorientation and creeping dread. "Hello?" I called out, my voice swallowed by the oppressive darkness. "Is anyone out there?" Only the howling wind answered, carrying with it the scent of decaying leaves and something else. Something I couldn't quite place, but which sent a shiver down my spine. I pushed on, my sodden clothes clinging to my skin, weighing me down with each step. The beam of my flashlight, growing weaker by the minute, danced erratically across gnarled tree trunks and shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. That's when I saw it. A pinprick of warm light in the distance, barely visible through the curtain of rain and mist. Hope surged through me, giving my weary legs renewed strength. "Hey!" I shouted, waving my arms frantically. "Over here, I need help!" As I drew closer, the source of the light revealed itself. A small, weathered cabin nestled in a clearing. Its rough-hewn logs and sagging roof spoke of age and neglect, yet a soft glow emanated from a single, grimy window. Relief flooded through me as I stumbled onto the cabin's rickety porch. My hand trembled as I raised it to knock on the door, but something made me hesitate. A chill that had nothing to do with my wet clothes crept over me. "Get a grip," I muttered to myself. "It's just an old cabin. Probably a park ranger station or something." I rapped my knuckles against the worn wood, the sound oddly muffled in the damp air. "Hello? Is anyone home? I'm lost and need shelter from the storm." Silence greeted me. The light in the window flickered, casting eerie shadows across the porch. I tried the door handle, surprised to find it unlocked. It swung open with a low, drawn-out creak that set my teeth on edge. "I'm coming in," I announced, stepping over the threshold. "I promise I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to get out of the rain and use a phone if you have one." The interior of the cabin was cloaked in shadows, illuminated only by the faint glow of an old oil lamp on a nearby table. As my eyes adjusted, I felt a growing sense of unease. Something was off. I fumbled for a light switch, my fingers brushing against rough wood paneling. Finding nothing, I pulled out my phone, using its fading light to survey my surroundings. What I saw made me gasp. The cabin's interior stretched far beyond what should have been possible given its modest exterior. A long hallway extended before me, lined with doors on either side, vanishing into darkness. "What the hell?" I whispered, my voice echoing unnaturally in the impossible space. I spun around, intending to flee back into the stormy night. But where the entrance should have been, I found only a solid wall. My heart began to race, panic clawing at my throat. "No, no, no," I muttered, running my hands over the wall. "This can't be happening. The door was right here." A soft chuckle drifted from somewhere deep within the cabin, sending ice through my veins. It was followed by a voice, barely more than a whisper, yet somehow filling the entire space. "Welcome, traveler. We've been expecting you." I whirled around, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. "Who's there? Show yourself." Another chuckle, this time from behind me. I spun again but saw only empty hallway stretching into darkness. "All in due time," the voice purred, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "For now, why don't you make yourself at home? You have an eternity to get acquainted with your new surroundings." A door creaked open somewhere in the depths of the cabin, followed by the sound of shuffling footsteps. My breath came in ragged gasps as I pressed my back against the wall, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. "This isn't real," I told myself, squeezing my eyes shut. "I must have hit my head out there. I'm hallucinating. When I open my eyes, I'll be back in the forest." But when I looked again, the impossible interior remained. The oil lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to reach out with grasping fingers. And somewhere in the depths of this nightmare cabin, something was coming for me. I realized then that my discovery of the place was no accident. The cabin had called to me, lured me in with the promise of shelter. And now, like a fly in a spider's web, I was trapped. With no other choice, I took a tentative step forward, deeper into the heart of this dimensional anomaly. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, the sound echoing ominously through the endless corridors. "Hello?" I called out again, my voice quavering. "Please, if anyone can hear me, I need help. I don't understand what's happening." Only silence answered, broken by the distant sound of a door slamming shut. I flinched, nearly dropping my phone. Its battery indicator blinked red, a warning that my only source of light would soon be gone. As I stood there, paralyzed by indecision and fear, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Unseen eyes bored into me from every shadow, every darkened doorway. The cabin itself seemed alive, pulsing with a malevolent energy that made my skin crawl. I had found shelter from the storm, yes, but in doing so I had stumbled into a nightmare far worse than anything the Ozark wilderness could have thrown at me. This discovery marked the beginning of a terrifying journey, one that would test the limits of my sanity and my will to survive. With a deep breath, I steeled myself and took another step forward. Whatever horrors awaited me in the depths of this impossible cabin, I had no choice but to face them. The way out, if one existed at all, lay somewhere ahead in the darkness. Little did I know, as I ventured deeper into that labyrinthine hell, that my nightmare had only just begun. As I ventured deeper into the cabin's twisted reality, my mind struggled to comprehend the impossibility surrounding me. The narrow hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, defying the laws of physics and sanity alike. My flashlight beam danced across weathered wooden walls that pulsed and shifted in my peripheral vision, as if alive and breathing. "This can't be real," I muttered, my voice unnaturally muffled in the stagnant air. "It's just a small cabin. This isn't possible." But with each step, the truth of my situation became harder to deny. I passed door after door, each one identical and yet somehow distinct. Some were weathered and cracked, while others gleamed as if freshly painted. Curiosity warred with fear as I reached for the nearest handle. The door swung open with an ominous creak, revealing a vast ballroom straight out of the Victorian era. Dusty chandeliers hung from a ceiling lost in shadows, and tattered curtains stirred in a non-existent breeze. The incongruity of it all made my head spin. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Is anyone here?" A faint melody drifted through the air, growing louder as I stepped into the room. Ghostly figures materialized, twirling in a macabre waltz. Their faces were blurred, features indistinct, but their eyes gleamed with a hunger that sent me scrambling back into the hallway. I slammed the door shut, heart pounding. This isn't happening. It can't be happening. But as I turned, I found myself face to face with a new horror. The hallway had changed, twisting into a spiral staircase that corkscrewed upwards into darkness. The doors I had passed were gone, leaving me with no choice but to ascend. Each step creaked and groaned under my weight, threatening to give way. I climbed for what felt like hours, my legs burning with exertion. Just as I was about to collapse from exhaustion, I reached a landing. A single door stood before me, its surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to writhe and change as I watched. Against my better judgment, I pushed it open. I found myself in a vast library, shelves stretching impossibly high and far in every direction. The air was thick with the musty scent of old paper and something more acrid, the tang of fear and desperation. "Welcome to the archive," a voice whispered from the shadows. "Every story ever told, every life ever lived, all here, waiting to be read." I spun around, searching for the source of the voice. "Who are you? What is this place?" A figure emerged from between the shelves, a tall, gaunt man in a librarian's outfit that might have been fashionable a century ago. His skin was pale as parchment, his eyes dark pools that reflected no light. "I am the archivist," he said, his voice a dry rustle. "And you, my dear, are our newest acquisition." I backed away, bumping into a shelf. Books tumbled to the floor, their pages fluttering open. To my horror, I saw my own face staring back at me from one of them, my eyes wide with terror. "What do you mean, acquisition?" I demanded, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. The archivist smiled, revealing teeth filed to sharp points. "Every soul that enters the cabin becomes part of its story. Your fears, your hopes, your very essence, all of it will be recorded here for eternity." I turned to run, only to find the door had vanished. Rows of bookshelves stretched endlessly in every direction. "There's no escape," the archivist chuckled. "The cabin reshapes itself constantly. Even I don't know all its secrets." Desperation clawed at my throat. "There has to be a way out. Please, I don't belong here." The archivist's expression softened, almost to pity. "No one belongs here, my dear, and yet here we all are. But perhaps, yes, perhaps there is a way." Hope surged through me. "Tell me. I'll do anything." "Find the heart of the cabin," he whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "The source of its power. But be warned, others have tried and failed. Their stories fill these shelves, tales of madness and despair." A distant howl echoed through the library, causing the archivist to flinch. "You must go. They're coming. The hunters. Lost souls trapped here for so long they've forgotten their humanity. They'll try to stop you, to make you one of them." "But how do I find the heart?" I pleaded. "This place is impossible." The archivist pressed a book into my hands. "Your story. Read it, understand it, and perhaps you'll find the clues you need. Now run." The howls grew louder, accompanied by the sound of racing footsteps. I clutched the book to my chest and plunged into the maze of shelves, my mind reeling from the impossible reality I now found myself in. As I ran, the library shifted and changed around me. Shelves rearranged themselves, creating new paths and dead ends. The ceiling soared higher, lost in a void that seemed to stretch to infinity. Whispers echoed from the books, a cacophony of voices begging to be heard. I stumbled through a gap between two towering shelves and found myself in a new area entirely. Gone was the musty library. I now stood in a sterile, white-tiled corridor that stretched in both directions as far as the eye could see. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows. "Hello?" I called out, my voice bouncing off the cold surfaces. "Is anyone there?" A door slammed in the distance, followed by the squeak of wheels on linoleum. A figure in a blood-stained doctor's coat appeared at the far end of the corridor, pushing a gurney. "Ah, our new patient has arrived," the figure called out, its voice distorted and inhuman. "Don't worry, we'll take good care of you. Forever." Terror gripped me as I realized this new horror was just another facet of the cabin's impossible interior. I turned and ran in the opposite direction, the sound of squeaking wheels growing louder behind me. As I fled, doors flew open on either side of the corridor. Grotesque figures in hospital gowns reached out with gnarled hands, moaning and pleading. Their faces were a blur of features, constantly shifting and reforming. "Join us," they wailed. "Become one with the cabin. It's the only way to end the pain." I squeezed my eyes shut and pushed forward, clutching the book the archivist had given me like a lifeline. When I opened them again, the hospital corridor had vanished. I found myself in a dark, dank cave system, the walls glistening with moisture. The constant shifting of the cabin's interior was taking its toll on my sanity. I leaned against a rocky wall, trying to catch my breath and gather my thoughts. Focus, I told myself, my voice echoing in the cavern. There has to be a pattern, a logic to this madness. The heart of the cabin. I have to find it. I opened the book, its pages glowing faintly in the darkness. As I began to read my own story, I realized with growing horror that it wasn't just a record of my past. It was actively being written, describing my current predicament in real time. The impossible interior of the cabin was more than just a physical labyrinth. It was a maze of the mind, a trap for the soul, and as I delved deeper into its secrets, I knew that my greatest challenge lay not in the horrors that lurked in its ever-changing rooms, but in maintaining my grip on reality itself. With a deep breath, I pushed away from the wall and ventured deeper into the cave system. The heart of the cabin was out there somewhere, hidden in this nightmare of impossibility, and I was determined to find it, no matter the cost. The dank cave system gradually gave way to a misty forest, impossibly contained within the cabin's endless interior. Gnarled trees loomed overhead, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The ground beneath my feet squelched with each step, a thick carpet of rotting leaves and moss that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly life. As I pushed through the dense underbrush, a twig snapped behind me. I whirled around, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Show yourself." Only silence answered, broken by the occasional rustle of leaves. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of predatory eyes following my every move. I pressed on, clutching the book the archivist had given me like a talisman. Its pages continued to fill with my unfolding story, the ink seemingly writing itself. As I glanced down at the latest entry, a chill ran down my spine. She doesn't realize it yet, but the hunt has already begun. The cabin's victims, twisted by time and torment, stalk her through the ever-changing landscape. They were once like her, lost, afraid, desperately seeking escape. Now, they serve only the cabin's insatiable hunger. A branch cracked loudly to my left. I spun, catching a glimpse of a pale, emaciated figure darting between the trees. Its movements were unnaturally fluid, more akin to a spider than a human. "Hello?" I called out, trying to keep the fear from my voice. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just want to find a way out." A low, guttural laugh echoed through the trees. "Out?" a raspy voice mocked. "There is no out, only in, further in, deeper, until you become one with the cabin, like us." More movement caught my eye, shadows flitting between the trees, drawing closer. I backed away, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "Please," I pleaded. "I don't want to be part of this. There has to be a way to escape." Another voice joined the first, this one high-pitched and childlike. "We thought that too once. But the cabin always wins. It's easier if you just give in." The mist thickened, obscuring my vision. Shapes moved within it, twisted, horrific silhouettes that defied description. I turned to run, only to collide with a solid mass that hadn't been there a moment before. I looked up into the face of what had once been a man. His skin was gray and papery, stretched tight over protruding bones. Where his eyes should have been, there were only empty, weeping sockets. A grotesque smile split his face, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Welcome, sister," he rasped, reaching for me with elongated fingers. "Let us show you the true wonders of your new home." I screamed, shoving him away with all my strength. His body crumbled like ash, dissolving into the mist. But even as he vanished, more figures emerged from the gloom. I ran blindly through the forest, branches whipping at my face and tearing at my clothes. The sound of pursuit filled the air, inhuman howls, scuttling movements, and the constant whisper of my name carried on a wind that shouldn't exist inside a cabin. "You can't escape us," a chorus of voices called out. "We are the cabin, and the cabin is us. Your fear feeds us, your despair strengthens us. Run all you want. It only prolongs the inevitable." I burst through a thick wall of vegetation, finding myself on the edge of a vast chasm. An old rope bridge swayed in the spectral wind, spanning the impossible gap. Behind me, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. With no other choice, I stepped onto the bridge. The rotted planks creaked ominously under my weight. I was halfway across when I heard it, the snap of ropes fraying. I broke into a run, the bridge swaying wildly beneath me. Just as I reached the other side, the ropes gave way. I leapt, my fingers scrambling for purchase on the rocky ledge. As I pulled myself up, I looked back. The forest and chasm were gone, replaced by a long corridor lined with mirrors. In each reflection, I saw a different version of myself. Some bloodied and battered, others twisted into inhuman shapes. And behind each reflection, the shadowy forms of my pursuers loomed. I stumbled down the hall, trying to avoid looking at the nightmarish images. But their voices followed me, a cacophony of pleas and threats. "Join us. You can't run forever. The cabin will have you in the end." At the end of the hall, I found a door. I yanked it open and threw myself through, slamming it shut behind me. I found myself in a small, ordinary-looking bedroom. For a moment, I dared to hope I had found a safe haven. Then I saw the writing on the walls. Thousands of tally marks, scratched into every surface. In the center of the room stood an old man, his beard long and matted, his eyes wild with madness. "You're new," he croaked, his voice hoarse from disuse. "How long has it been since I've seen a new face? Days, years, centuries?" "Who are you?" I asked, pressing myself against the door. "What is this place?" The old man laughed, a sound devoid of mirth. This is my sanctuary, my prison. I've hidden here for I don't even know anymore. Time has no meaning in the cabin." "But the others," I said, "the ones hunting me, why haven't they found you?" His expression darkened. "Oh, they know I'm here. They visit sometimes, scratching at the door, whispering their promises and threats. But I made a deal, you see. I feed the cabin in other ways." He gestured to a desk covered in papers. "I write. Stories, poems, screams, put to paper. The cabin feeds on creation as much as destruction. As long as I write, it leaves me in relative peace." I approached the desk, looking at the endless pages of scrawled text. "So you're safe here?" The old man's laugh turned into a hacking cough. "Safe? No one's safe in the cabin. I'm just suspended, neither fully claimed nor free. It's a half-life, a purgatory of my own making." A scratching sound came from the other side of the door, followed by muffled voices. The old man's eyes widened in fear. "They're here," he whispered. "You've led them to me. You need to go. Now." "But where?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. "How do I escape them?" The old man pointed to a wardrobe in the corner. "Through there. It'll take you somewhere else in the cabin. Keep moving, keep running, and whatever you do, don't let them catch you. Don't let the cabin break you." As the scratching at the door grew louder, I rushed to the wardrobe and pulled it open. Instead of clothes, I saw a long, dark tunnel stretching into the unknown. "Go," the old man urged. "And remember, the cabin twists everything, even memory. Don't trust what you see, what you remember. The only truth is survival." With one last look at the old man, I stepped into the wardrobe. As I moved deeper into the darkness, I heard the bedroom door burst open behind me, followed by inhuman shrieks and the old man's terrified screams. The hunt was far from over. It had only just begun. The darkness of the wardrobe tunnel gave way to a blinding white light. I stumbled forward, shielding my eyes, only to find myself in what appeared to be a sterile, white-walled laboratory. The sudden shift in environment was jarring, and I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. "Subject has entered test chamber 17, a disembodied voice announced over an unseen intercom. "Initiating cognitive dissonance protocols. I spun around, searching for the source of the voice. "Hello? Who's there? What is this place?" No answer came. Instead, the white walls began to ripple and distort, as if they were made of liquid. Images flickered across their surface. Memories of my life before the cabin, but twisted and wrong. I saw myself in situations I knew had never happened. Heard myself say things I'd never said. "This isn't real," I muttered, pressing my palms against my temples. "It's just another trick of the cabin." "Is it?" My own voice echoed back at me from the walls. "Or is the cabin the only real thing and everything else a lie?" I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the cacophony of conflicting memories and sensations. When I opened them again, the lab had transformed into a funhouse of mirrors. My reflections stared back at me, each one slightly different. Some older, some younger, some barely recognizable as human. One reflection stepped out of its mirror, regarding me with a mixture of pity and disdain. "You're not doing very well, are you?" it said in my voice. "The cabin's already starting to break you." "You're not real," I insisted, backing away. "You're just a hallucination." The reflection laughed. "Of course I'm real. I'm you, the you that accepted the cabin, that stopped fighting. And I'm here to tell you it's so much easier if you just give in." Another reflection emerged, this one battered and scarred. "Don't listen," it shouted. "Keep fighting. There's still a way out if you can just hold on to your sanity." More reflections stepped out, each one offering conflicting advice, pleading or threatening. Their voices rose to a deafening crescendo, and I clutched my head in agony. "Stop it," I screamed. "Just stop." Silence fell abruptly. I looked up to find myself alone in a small padded cell. A straitjacket confined my arms, and I realized with horror that I couldn't remember how I got here or how long I'd been confined. A small window in the door slid open, and a pair of eyes peered in at me. "How are we feeling today?" a clinical voice asked. "Where am I?" I demanded. "What's happening to me?" "You're safe," the voice assured me. "You're in the Ozark State Mental Hospital. You've been here for quite some time now, don't you remember?" A flood of memories rushed in, being found wandering in the woods, raving about an impossible cabin. Months of therapy and medication. But these memories felt hazy, unreal. "No." I shook my head violently. "This isn't right. The cabin is real. It has to be." The eyes in the window regarded me sadly. "I see we're still clinging to our delusions. Don't worry, we'll increase your medication. You'll feel better soon." As the window slid shut, panic gripped me. What if this was real? What if the cabin had all been a hallucination, a product of a broken mind? But then why did this hospital feel so wrong, so artificial? "It's not real," I whispered to myself. "The cabin is testing me, trying to make me doubt my own mind." I closed my eyes, focusing on what I knew to be true. The cabin, the archivist, the book of my story. When I opened my eyes again, the padded cell was gone. I found myself in a vast library, identical to the one where I'd met the archivist. "Well done." His dry voice came from behind a shelf. "You've passed the first true test of the cabin. Many lose themselves in the false realities it creates." I spun to face him, anger bubbling up inside me. "Why? Why put me through that?" The archivist's parchment-like face creased in what might have been a smile. "The cabin feeds on confusion, on the blurring of reality and fiction. It seeks to unmoor you from your sense of self, to make you malleable. Only those who can hold on to their core truths have any hope of finding the heart." "And what if I had believed it?" I asked. "What if I'd accepted that asylum as reality?" "Then you would have joined the others," he replied simply. "Trapped in a prison of your own making. Another story on these shelves." I shuddered, realizing how close I'd come to losing myself. How can I trust anything I see or experience in this place? The archivist reached out, tapping the book I still clutched in my hands. "This is your anchor, your story, as it truly unfolds. When in doubt, consult its pages. But be warned, the cabin will try to twist even this truth." As if on cue, the words on the pages began to shift and change before my eyes. I slammed the book shut, my heart racing. I don't know how much more of this I can take, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. That is precisely what the cabin wants you to feel, the archivist said. Doubt, despair, the erosion of your will to resist. You must stay strong, hold on to your sense of self. A distant howl echoed through the library, causing the archivist to stiffen. They're coming. The hunters have picked up your trail again. You must go. But where? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. How can I find my way when nothing here makes sense? The archivist's eyes softened with something like pity. Trust your instincts. The heart of the cabin calls to all who are trapped here. Let that pull guide you, but be wary. It may lead you through your darkest fears and memories. As the howls grew louder, the archivist ushered me towards a section of shelving. It swung open, revealing a dark passage beyond. Remember, he called as I stepped through, your mind is both your greatest weapon and your greatest vulnerability here. Stay focused on your goal no matter what horrors or temptations the cabin throws at you. The shelves swung shut behind me, plunging me into darkness. As I felt my way forward, I couldn't shake the creeping doubt that gnawed at the edges of my mind. How much of what I'd experienced was real? How could I trust my own perceptions in this reality-warping nightmare? I pressed on, knowing that to stop, to give in to doubt and despair, would mean losing myself entirely to the cabin's twisted embrace. My sanity was unraveling, threads of reality and illusion intertwining in a tapestry of madness. But somewhere in this labyrinth lay the truth, the heart of the cabin, and my only hope for escape. As I stumbled through the dark passage, the air grew thick and oppressive. The walls seemed to pulse, as if alive, and whispers echoed from unseen corners. I emerged into a vast circular chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows above. At the center stood a pulsing crystalline structure that bathed the room in an eerie, shifting light. Welcome, a voice boomed, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. We've been waiting for you. I spun around, searching for the source. Who are you? What is this place? The light from the crystal intensified, and within its facets, I saw faces, hundreds of them, contorted in expressions of agony and despair. We are the cabin, the voices spoke in unison, and you, dear child, are our newest acquisition. A figure materialized before me, an amalgamation of features from the faces in the crystal. Its form shifted constantly, never settling on a single appearance. What do you mean, acquisition? I demanded, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. The figure's laugh was a cacophony of different tones. Surely you've realized by now. This cabin, this place between realities, it feeds on the fear, the despair, the very essence of those who enter. As it spoke, memories flooded back, every terrifying encounter, every moment of doubt and despair since I'd entered the cabin. But now I saw them from a different perspective. I saw how each experience had drained something from me, feeding the pulsing crystal at the center of the room. No, I whispered, backing away. This can't be real. Oh, but it is, the figure said, its voice almost gentle. Every lost soul who wanders in becomes part of us. Their fears, their hopes, their very being. All of it fuels the cabin's existence. I thought of the hunters, the twisted forms I'd encountered. And the others? The ones who chased me? The figure's form rippled, briefly taking on the appearances of the various entities I'd encountered. Mere puppets, extensions of our will. Some were once like you, new arrivals, fighting against their fate. But in time, all submit. All become part of the greater whole. Anger surged through me, momentarily overriding my fear. I won't. I'll find a way out. I'll destroy this place if I have to. The figure's laughter shook the chamber. Brave words, but you're not the first to make such claims. Look. The crystal's light intensified, and I saw visions of others who had stood where I now stood. I saw their defiance, their desperate attempts to escape or destroy the cabin, and I saw their eventual defeat, their essence absorbed into the crystal's depths. "You see," the figure said, "resistance is futile. But take heart. In joining us, you'll experience wonders beyond imagination. You'll be part of something greater than yourself." As it spoke, I felt a pull towards the crystal. Part of me longed to give in to end the fear and uncertainty, but another part rebelled, clinging desperately to my sense of self. "No," I said, my voice stronger now. "I won't become part of this. I won't be another source of fear for you to feed on." The figure's form solidified, taking on a more humanoid shape. Its eyes, however, remained pools of swirling energy. "You speak as if you have a choice, but you've been feeding us since the moment you entered. Every fear, every doubt, all of it has strengthened us." It gestured, and suddenly I was surrounded by mirrors. In each reflection, I saw myself, but changed. Older in some, twisted and inhuman in others. "This is your future," the figure said. "Every possible version of you, trapped here for eternity. Why fight it? Why not embrace your destiny?" I closed my eyes, trying to block out the nightmarish visions. "You're lying. This is just another trick, another attempt to break me." When I opened my eyes, the mirrors were gone. The figure stood closer now, its features an unsettling blend of everyone I'd ever known. "Is it?" it asked softly. "Or is this the first real truth you've encountered since entering our domain? Think, child. How long have you been here? Days? Weeks? Years? Time has no meaning in this place." And I realized with horror that I couldn't remember. My life before the cabin seemed like a distant dream, fading with each passing moment. "What you're feeling now is the acceptance," the figure said, its voice almost kind. "The realization that this is your new reality. Embrace it. Become one with us, and the fear will end." It reached out a hand, inviting me to take it. For a moment, I was tempted. To end the terror, the uncertainty. It was an alluring prospect. But then I felt the weight of the book the archivist had given me, still clutched in my hand. I opened it, seeing my story written out, including this very moment. "No," I said, my resolve strengthening. "This isn't the end of my story. I won't let it be." The figure's expression hardened, its form becoming more monstrous. "Then you choose the hard way. So be it." The chamber began to shake, the crystal's light pulsing erratically. The figure dissolved into mist, its voice echoing as it faded. "Run, little morsel. Hide if you can. But know this. Every step you take, every breath you draw within these walls, only brings you closer to us. In the end, all become one with the cabin." As the chamber crumbled around me, I clutched the book to my chest and ran. The cruel truth of the cabin's nature burned in my mind, but with it came a fierce determination. I would find a way to escape, to end this nightmare, not just for myself, but for all the souls trapped within the cabin's twisted reality. The hunt had taken on a new dimension. No longer was I simply prey. I was a threat to the very nature of this place, and as I plunged into another impossible corridor, I steeled myself for whatever horrors lay ahead. The cabin had revealed its true face, and in doing so had given me a target for my defiance. My journey was far from over, but now at least, I understood the true stakes of this nightmarish game. The revelation of the cabin's true nature had left me shaken, but also strangely empowered. As I navigated through ever-shifting corridors and impossible rooms, my mind raced, piecing together everything I'd experienced since entering this nightmarish realm. I found myself in a dimly lit study, walls lined with ancient tomes and peculiar artifacts. The air was thick with the scent of old parchment and something more acrid, the tang of desperation and faded hope. "Think," I muttered to myself, pacing the creaking floorboards. There has to be a way to beat this thing. As if in response to my thoughts, a book fell from one of the shelves, landing at my feet with a dull thud. I picked it up, my hands trembling slightly as I read the title. The Architecture of Nightmare Realms. Well, that's certainly on the nose, I said with a humorless chuckle. As I flipped through the pages, a slip of paper fell out, a handwritten note in a shaky script. To whoever finds this, the cabin can be defeated, but at great cost. Its power lies in the fears and despair of its victims. To destroy it, one must... The rest was illegible, smeared with what looked disturbingly like blood. Great, I sighed. Another cryptic clue in this house of horrors. But it was something, a starting point. I began to formulate a plan, desperate and likely doomed to fail, but a plan nonetheless. Okay, I said aloud, organizing my thoughts. The cabin feeds on fear and despair. It traps people, twists them, turns them into fuel, I guess. So if I could somehow disrupt that process... A cold laugh echoed through the study, causing me to spin around. The archivist stood in the doorway, his parchment-like skin seeming even more worn and translucent than before. An admirable thought, he said, his voice dry as autumn leaves. But do you truly think you're the first to try? I held up the book and note. You knew about this, didn't you? Why didn't you tell me earlier? The archivist's hollow eyes seemed to look through me. Information is power in this place. I couldn't be certain of your intentions or your strength. And now, I challenged. He nodded slowly. Now, perhaps, you're ready. But I warn you, the path you're considering is fraught with peril. Many have tried to disrupt the cabin's feeding process. Most have been absorbed, becoming part of the very system they sought to destroy. I squared my shoulders, trying to project more confidence than I felt. I have to try. I can't just give up, become another story in your library. No, the archivist mused. I suppose you can't. Very well, I will share what I know. But first, you must understand the true nature of your enemy. He gestured, and the study transformed around us. We stood in a vast, pulsing chamber, the heart of the cabin I had glimpsed earlier. The cabin is not merely a place, the archivist explained. It is a living entity, a parasite that feeds on human consciousness. It creates these elaborate illusions, these tests and trials, to generate the fear and despair it craves. I watched as tendrils of energy flowed from shadowy figures, trapped souls, into the central crystal. So how do we stop it? The archivist's expression grew grave. To defeat the cabin, one must poison its food source. You must find a way to transmute the fear and despair of its victims into something the cabin cannot process. Hope, perhaps, or defiance. I frowned, trying to wrap my mind around the concept. But how? This place twists everything, turns every positive thought into another nightmare. Precisely why it has never been done, the archivist nodded. But you have something the others didn't. He pointed to the book I still clutched in my hand. Your story, unfolding in real time. It is a tether to your true self, a weapon against the cabin's illusions. A plan began to form in my mind, wild and desperate. What if I could share my story with the others trapped here? Help them remember who they really are? The archivist's eyes widened slightly. A dangerous gambit. The cabin will fight you at every turn. And if you fail, if your own resolve wavers for even a moment, I'll become just another exhibit in your library. I finished grimly. I know, but I have to try. He nodded slowly. Then let me show you the path. But be warned, the cabin knows we plot against it. The challenges you've faced so far will pale in comparison to what lies ahead. As if on cue, an inhuman shriek echoed through the chamber. The shadows around us began to coalesce into monstrous forms. Go! The archivist shouted, pushing me towards a doorway that hadn't been there a moment before. Find the others. Remind them of their humanity. It's the only way. I hesitated for a split second. What about you? A sad smile crossed his papery features. I am as much a part of this place as the walls themselves. My role is to observe, to record. But perhaps in helping you, I can finally write an ending to my own story. With a final nod of gratitude, I plunged through the doorway. Behind me, I heard the archivist's voice rise in a language I didn't understand, holding off the encroaching horrors, buying me time. I raced through twisting corridors, the cabin's layout shifting wildly around me. My desperate plan echoed in my mind with each pounding step. Find the trapped souls. Share my story. Awaken their humanity. Turn fear into hope. It was a long shot, a fool's errand perhaps. But as the cabin's monstrous creations pursued me through its nightmare realm, I clung to this fragile plan like a lifeline. For the first time since entering this hell, I felt a glimmer of something I had almost forgotten. Hope. It was a dangerous emotion in this place, one the cabin would surely try to twist and exploit. But it was also a weapon, perhaps the only one that could truly harm this consciousness-devouring entity. As I ran, I began to call out, my voice echoing through the impossible geometries of the cabin. To anyone who can hear me, remember who you are. This isn't real. We can fight this. The cabin shuddered around me, as if in pain or anger. I knew the real battle was only just beginning. But I had a purpose now, a desperate plan that just might work, or it might doom us all. Only time, if such a thing truly existed here, would tell. The cabin's endless corridors twisted and warped around me as I ran, calling out to its trapped souls. With each step, I felt the malevolent entity's fury growing, its very walls seeming to pulse with rage. Remember who you are, I shouted, my voice echoing through impossible spaces. This isn't real. We can fight this together. Suddenly I burst into a vast chamber, its boundaries lost in swirling mist. Ghostly figures materialized, dozens, perhaps hundreds of lost souls, their forms flickering like dying candles. A familiar voice cut through the silence. Well, well, the little morsel thinks she can save us all. The amalgamated figure I'd encountered in the heart of the cabin stepped forward, its features a nightmarish blend of everyone I'd ever known. You're too late, it sneered. These souls are mine. They've forgotten everything they once were. I held up the book containing my story, its pages glowing faintly. No, I don't believe that. There's still hope. The figure laughed, the sound reverberating painfully in my skull. Hope? In this place? Oh, my dear, you really don't understand, do you? With a gesture, the mist cleared, revealing the full horror of our surroundings. We stood on a narrow platform suspended over an abyss. Far below, a writhing mass of darkness pulsed and churned. Behold the true form of your cabin, the figure said, its voice dripping with malice. A consciousness beyond your comprehension, fed by the fear and despair of countless souls across countless realities. I felt a wave of vertigo, nearly dropping my book. The sheer scale of what we faced threatened to overwhelm me. But then I felt it, a faint pulse of something warm and bright, emanating from the pages in my hand. No, I said, straightening my back. I won't give up, I can't. I turned to address the gathered souls, their forms growing clearer as I focused on them. Listen to me, all of you. I know you're scared. I know you've forgotten who you are. But we can fight this. The amalgamated figure snarled, its form growing more monstrous. Silence. They cannot hear you. They are mine. But I pressed on, opening my book and beginning to read aloud. This is my story. Our story. The story of everyone trapped in this nightmare. As I read, something remarkable happened. The ghostly figures began to solidify, their features becoming more distinct, Some looked confused, others afraid, but in their eyes I saw a spark of recognition. "That's right," I encouraged them. "Remember who you are. Remember your lives before this place." A woman stepped forward, her form flickering but growing stronger by the moment. I was a teacher," she said hesitantly. "I had students who relied on me." "Lies!" the cabin's avatar roared, but its voice seemed weaker now, less certain. An elderly man joined her. "I was a grandfather," he said, his voice growing stronger. "I had grandchildren I adored." One by one, the souls began to remember, to reclaim their identities. With each declaration, the platform we stood on grew more solid, the abyss below less threatening. The amalgamated figure writhed in apparent agony. "No, stop this. You are nothing. You are mine." But its protests fell on deaf ears. The awakening souls turned to face it, their eyes now burning with a fierce determination. "We are not yours," they said in unison. "We never were." I felt a surge of energy coursing through me, through all of us. The book in my hands grew warm, its pages now shining with a brilliant light. "This ends now," I declared, my voice ringing with a power I didn't know I possessed. The cabin's avatar lunged at me, its form a maelstrom of teeth and claws and darkness. But the awakened souls moved as one, forming a barrier between us. "No more fear," they intoned. "No more despair. We reclaim our stories." A deafening shriek filled the air as the avatar began to disintegrate. The very fabric of the cabin's reality seemed to tear apart around us. In that moment of chaos, I saw a chance. Perhaps our only chance. "Everyone," I shouted above the din, "focus on who you are, on your lives, your loved ones. It's our only way out." I clutched the book to my chest and closed my eyes, pouring every ounce of my being into the memory of my life before the cabin. I felt others doing the same, their energies intertwining with mine. The screaming grew louder, the sensation of falling overwhelming. And then, silence. I opened my eyes to find myself lying on the forest floor, the mundane exterior of a small cabin before me. Around me, others were stirring, real, solid people, no longer ghostly apparitions. Did we do it?" someone asked hesitantly. I looked down at the book in my hands. Its pages were blank now, but I felt the weight of our shared story within it. "I think we did," I said, my voice hoarse but filled with wonder. "We reclaimed our stories. We beat the cabin." As the group of survivors gathered themselves, sharing tears and disbelieving laughter, I turned to look at the cabin one last time. For a moment I thought I saw a flicker of movement in its window, a tall, gaunt figure nodding in what might have been approval. "Thank you, archivist," I whispered. The cabin shimmered once like a mirage in the desert, and then it was gone. In its place stood a simple memorial stone, engraved with words that sent a shiver down my spine. "To those who entered, feared, and conquered, may your stories never be forgotten." As we made our way out of the forest, supporting each other both physically and emotionally, I knew that our ordeal was far from over. The scars left by the cabin would take time to heal, if they ever did completely. But we had done the impossible. We had faced our deepest fears, reclaimed our identities, and emerged victorious. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, our shared experience binding us in a way few could understand. The cabin was gone, its appetite for fear and despair finally sated. But its legacy lived on in us, not as trauma, but as a testament to the indomitable nature of the human spirit. As we reached the edge of the forest, the sun breaking through the clouds in a brilliant display, I allowed myself a small smile. Our story, my story, had found its ending, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, that ending was filled not with fear or despair but with hope.